The hearing will come to order. Good morning. I'd like to welcome everyone to today's Energy and Water Member Day hearing. Today, our fellow members will have the opportunity to testify on issues under the jurisdiction of this subcommittee that are important to them. Each witness will have 5 minutes to present their testimony. Members of the subcommittee will then have the opportunity to ask questions if they'd like to do so. I know everyone has busy schedules today, so I will forego any extended remarks. I look forward to learning more from our colleagues on their priorities for the fiscal 26 energy and water bill. At this time, I'd like to recognize my friend, Ms. Capter, for any opening remarks she'd like to make. Ms. Capter.
Thank you, Chairman Fleischman, and thank you to our colleagues who come before us today. We appreciate very much the time you've taken to be here and advocate for your communities, and I look forward to hearing your priorities, learning more about your part of the country, including federal programs of importance to you and your district. I yield back.
I'd like to thank the ranking member. We will now turn to our witnesses. First up, I'd like to welcome Congressman Randy Weber from the state of Texas. Mr. Weber, you're recognized for 5 minutes, sir.
Thank you. Are we on? We are on. Okay. Well, good morning, Mr. Chairman, Ranking Member Capter, and the Ranking Member DeLauro and Cole, and Chairman Cole, who I don't see. But I am Randy Weber. I have the great honor of representing Texas 14th District, which is the Gulf Coast of Texas, starting at the Louisiana line and going down the curve of Texas. Let me tell you, my district is not just a dot on the map, nor is it just a curve. It is the beating heart of American energy, trade, and security. Why do I say that? Texas 14 is home to some of the largest refineries in the nation. We export American-produced LNG through 3 major terminals. We operate the most strategic military port in the country. We move more military personnel and equipment out of the country than any other port in the United States. We operate on every day. Our 7 ports operates pipelines and ship channels. We keep the American economy running and keep our military supplied and keep our military moving, quite frankly. But here's the hard truth. If we don't invest in the deepening and strengthening of these waterways, if we let them degrade, they silt in, as most of y'all will know, then what's the point of all this energy production? Because we can't move it out. What good is having oil and gas if we can't move it out safely and efficiently? What good is an American energy dominance if the infrastructure support is crumbling? We will fall woefully behind. The Sabine-Neches Waterway is the longest waterway in the Gulf Coast, second only to the Mississippi River, okay? It is the most critical waterway, one of the most critical waterway systems in our country. The impact of the Sabine-Neches Waterway is undeniable. The waterway moves over, check this out, 194 million tons of cargo every single year, and it is the largest crude oil and LNG exporter in the nation. The waterway has not undergone any improvements in over 50 years. And improving this waterway by deepening the channel from 40 feet to 48 feet will allow larger ships to come up into the channel and get the cargo a lot more quicker and a lot more efficiently, unleashing the power of American energy by enabling future growth and increases in shipping volumes, which helps with trade, by the way. The Port of Galveston, one of my other ports, operating since 1825, believe it or not, it was formed by the Mexican government before Texas won its independence in 1836, is a vital commercial hub in my district, handling both cargo, not only cargo, energy, but cruise traffic, cruise terminals. We have a lot of cruises out of Galveston. Each year, Galveston Port moves over 4 million tons of cargo and welcomes over 1 million cruise passengers every year. To stay competitive and accommodate modern fleets, channel dredging and harbor improvements are absolutely essential. Not to mention, we also have what's called Coastal Texas Protection and Restoration Project, which is necessary for the Gulf Coast because we have so many hurricanes. We're prone to so many hurricanes. That project is to reduce the risk for storm surge for the millions of folks and the energy businesses who live on the coast and are very critical industries that keep the U.S. up and running. The Texas legislature, y'all, understands that investing in our future is in that infrastructure is investing in our future. That's why the state of Texas has stepped up with funding for the Brazos River floodgates, which are critical structures on the Gulf Intracoastal Waterway that has been in place since the 1940s. 1940s. And they're long overdue for modernization. Now it's time for the federal government to do its part by allowing the U.S. Army Corps of Engineers to accept the funds that Texas has already committed. And finally, we must stay ahead in small modular nuclear technology. Southeast Texas is ready to lead, but we need continued support to ensure the U.S. remains at the forefront, not playing catch up to China or Russia. So to recap, let me say this. We must fully fund the Sabine Neches Waterway Channel Improvement Project. We must deepen the Galveston Ship Channel. We must advance the Coastal Texas Barrier Protection and Restoration Project, and we must upgrade the Brazos River floodgates. And yes, we must continue to support nuclear demonstration projects as part of the all-of-the-above strategy to meet rising global demand. So to my esteemed colleagues, thank you for having me here today. Let's not talk about energy dominance and then fail to fund the very arteries that make it possible. Let me reiterate. If we're going to talk about we need to be energy dominant and the leader in the world, let's not fail to fund the very arteries that make it possible. Let's back up our principles with action. Y'all have the capability and the power to do that. I respectfully ask for your full and fair consideration of these vital projects. And with that, I will yield back or welcome any questions.
I thank the gentleman, my friend from Texas, for an excellent presentation. I have no questions at this time. Ms. Kapper?
Yes, Mr. Chairman, I'm going to take the time because I'm interested in this. I've never been to Galveston, or you're part of Texas, Congressman Weber, but they provided us with a little map here. And I wish it were larger, but tell us a little bit more about your district. And obviously the energy economy is the leading
Yes, ma'am.
economic activity of
Yes,
your
ma'am.
district.
And NASA, just for information, actually the Johnson Space Center was in Dr. Brian Babin's district, half a mile north of mine. 7,500 people who either work for NASA and or its subcontractors live in my district. So not only is energy very, very, very huge, so is space. It's an extremely, long district. Congresswoman Capter, I don't know how long yours is, but mine's 160 miles from the Louisiana border down to the southwest end. So the oil companies love me because we traverse that on every weekend.
All right. Well, that is a long district. And I wanted to just shift over a little bit if I could. LNG. I look at your region and I think about all the storms that have occurred in Texas. Has your district been a victim of the hurricanes and the changing climate at all?
I have been here. I have the gray hair to prove it. I was 8 years old in 1961 when Hurricane Carla hit the Texas Gulf Coast. And I've been through every single hurricane since that time. And believe it or not only do we have hurricanes, but we also have a Galveston Island. For the first time in my life, I'm 71 years old, I've lived in a 20-mile radius, had 16 degrees on the island last winter. Winter Storm Uri, if you remember from February of 2021, we had 18 degrees. So we've had a lot of weather patterns change, and it's a huge district, and we see a lot of weather.
And do you see those changing weather patterns having an impact on access or egress from your ports?
Well, yes, they do. Of course, when things are cold, for example, and I know y'all live up north. I'm not sure about Tennessee. I think that y'all's. You can tell I'm from Texas, y'all. I think y'all's buildings are built to withstand very cold temperatures. Ours are built more to stand high, warm temperatures and hurricane too. But a lot of things happen. Traffic gets snarled. The roads get icy. Pipes break. So when you have really cold winters, it'll affect the people in our district. And when you have a hurricane approaching, and the news is saying y'all need to evacuate. Unfortunately, and this is true in just about every district I see on TV, I say people, y'all need to evacuate. People are quite slow to evacuate, and so the roads get clogged very easily. So weather definitely affects us.
And what about coastal erosion in your region?
Coastal erosion is something that we deal with, but the USACE, United States Army Corps of Engineers, and the Galveston Flood Control District, we have an agreement with what they do is they re-nourish the beach sands. So when they do projects and when they do dredge, and quite frankly, that's a great question because when they do dredge out these long 40-something mile channels, then they can actually re-nourish the beach with that sand that they took from dredging.
And some of our coasts, we've had real challenges with coastal erosion.
Yes, ma'am.
Of a major proportion. So I was just curious about your region. Final question. I'm one of the members that cares about nuclear waste. I know our chairman does too. And having thought about nuclear power, do you have suggestions? I believe that Texas has disallowed storage of nuclear waste. Have you ever heard anybody in Texas who's interested in this challenge?
Well, yes, I have. Some of you probably won't know, but I spent 4 years in the Texas legislature before I got demoted to Congress. And we actually had waste control specialties out in Andrews County, far west Texas, which they wanted that facility. The community wanted it. The Chamber of Commerce wanted it. The City of Fathers wanted it. At some point in time, they changed their mind. They said they didn't want it anymore. So there's been that I've actually been there and visited with my own eyes in 2010, I think it was. Very futuristic, huge concrete barriers, huge rooms and stuff like that, so they can come on in, Mr. Costa. And so we've had that discussion. And Chairman Fleischman knows this, that we have a nuclear event every month. We're in session, about one a month over at the Capitol Hill Club, bipartisan, where we have Republicans and Democrats come talk to members, come talk to businesses. We've had people from the EPA, we've had people from the state, retired people from the State Department, we've had people from industries that come. It's non-attributable. We don't let all this stuff out. There's no sales going on. Nobody's trying to sell us into a product or something like that. We're talking about all the pathways and all the things that are growing. In other words, we're learning that there's more and more, for example, how France reproduces their nuclear waste. We could do the same thing. We have that discussion every month. I would invite all of you, and I know Chuck knows this. He's the one that really got me involved. He's good at it too, by the way.
Yes, he is.
But I would invite you all to come because it's really fascinating when you listen to it. And I forgot to say this. When I was in the Texas legislature for 4 years, I had a nuclear project in my district, South Texas Nuclear Project down in Matagorda County. I've been there in 2010 and watched them change out spent fuel rods with my own eyes. It's fascinating. They can do it cleanly. They can do it safely.
Well, I got to make it over to the Capitol Hill Club, Mr. Chairman. You got to help us.
You are always welcome, and many of your colleagues, Madam Ranking Member, come over, and Mr. Weber is absolutely right. They're not only very convivial discussions, very substantive, and help us do our work, and you are always welcome. I know Mr. Simpson has joined some of those, but Mr. Weber is there just about every month. In fact, there's one, I think, tomorrow night.
Yep.
So,
So Bill Foster, he comes quite regularly, and he always reminds us he's the only physicist in the
yes.
in the House.
And Mr. Levin from this committee, yes,
Absolutely.
is from California is a mainstay. So, but thank you. And this time, I think my distinguished colleague, Chairman of the Interior Subcommittee of Appropriations and former chair of this subcommittee, Mr. Simpson, would like to ask a question.
Thank you. Randy, I fully agree with you on the future of energy and SMRs and advanced design reactors that we're working on and stuff, not only for this country, but frankly for around the world. This committee is obviously very aware of that and been funding those projects as we can. Let me ask you about dredging, though. You have, I think every year you've come in and told us how important this is, what's the status of it now? Is the Army, because in the committee, we generally fund the Army Corps of Engineers dredging. We also do some specific projects if people request an earmark. Are you going to request an earmark for dredging in that area this year, or excuse me, it's community
Project funding
project
request, not
financing?
that I
One of
keep
those
up with
things.
that.
I scratch all that earmark stuff out.
Well, I am, Mr. Chairman. Thank you for that question. And here's the thing. Remember I said in my comments, 40 years that channel has not been dredged out. And the USACE, United States Army Corps of Engineers, helps, but there's a lot of red tape, bureaucratic hoops that they have to jump through. The Sabine Nature's Navigation District is the district that controls that, and they had ad valorem tax income. In other words, they're a taxing entity. The people of Jefferson County, we call it Southeast Texas, their jurisdiction, literally have contributed hundreds of millions of dollars. They have, and you know this, these projects, they require a local sponsor. Usually it's 25%. Sabine Nature's Navigation District, and we were with Russ Foe yesterday over in the House, the President's Office of Management and Budget, say the OMB. And Sabine Nature Waterway Navigation District was there with us. They literally stepped up to the plate and said, we will not contribute 25%. We will contribute 40%. And we're talking hundreds of millions of dollars. It's a $1.1 or $2 billion project. Yeah. And they have already started the work. They've already started the engineering. And so now what we need is the United States Congress to step up and say, look, for the number one energy export, not only energy, but don't forget I said military too, number one energy and military exporting port in the country, we really need to do this. There's a process, and this is more than y'all bargained for, so forgive me. There's a process where ships, when you have VLCC, very large crude containers that are coming into the Gulf there, the draft they take is they are not allowed to come up into that channel because it needs to be dredged to 48 feet. So they sit offshore, and they have these smaller vessels come up one at a time and offload some of the crude, for example, and then work their way up the channel, which is extremely busy, and they dock up, and they drop their load, if you will, offload their cargo. Then they got to go back out the channel, which is 48 miles to the Port of Beaumont, by the way, from the Gulf Coast. They got to go back to the VLCC, load up again, you see what's happening. If the channel was dredged, we could bring more product in and out a lot quicker. And God forbid that we have a problem where we need our military to get in high gear very quickly. It would enable them to do so more efficiently.
Yeah, that doesn't seem like a very efficient way to do it the way we're doing it now. And it's got to be costly to offload out in the Gulf and then.
Well, absolutely. And I'll tell you, Mr. Chairman, one of the things that we did, was it 2 or 3 years ago, we had to change the visa program because a lot of these ships bring sailors from other countries, and they can go ashore, and I think I forget exactly what the figures were. They had a 20-day visa or whatever it was, and they weren't in it. I mean, the ship might be out there 3 or 4 weeks. Well, and y'all will never know this unless you come to Galveston, but when you come across the causeway from Houston, across the bay, Galveston Bay, you can see the Galveston Island. You can see out in the Gulf, and if it's at night, you can see probably 30 or 40 ships because of their lights lined up, all waiting to get in. So you say, well, gosh, 20 days, you'd think they'd get in and out. They would if it was, 2 or 3 ships a day, but it's like 30 or 40, I bet, a day, if not more.
Yeah. Well, I appreciate that. I'm like Marcy, I've never been to Galveston, but I just read a book on the big hurricane that wiped out.
The storm of 1900.
Yeah, it was 1900.
It was almost, depends on whose figures you use, 6,000 people or 8,000 people. And they raised the entire island of Galveston 9 feet.
Yeah.
They brought in some of those dredge spoils, Ranking Member Captor was talking about, and they raised that whole island 9 feet.
But it was good for Houston because Houston and Galveston were in competition to be the main port and stuff.
Well, I'm still trying. You have to come up through the Galveston Bay to get up the channel and into Houston. I'm trying to figure out how I can get some toll arms there, where we can participate in their freight too.
Well, thank
Mr.
you.
Chairman.
I appreciate it.
And again, I thank Mr. Weber for his testimony today before us, sir. At this time, I would like to welcome Congressman Jim Costa from the state of California. Mr. Costa, you are recognized for 5 minutes, sir.
Thank you very much, Mr. Chairman, and Ranking Member Capture and my neighbor, Mr. Simpson, for allowing me to testify before the subcommittee. We have important work that we share. I look forward to working with the subcommittee on goals of deploying technologies for better reservoir management, advancing Western water storage projects, and upgrading our aging infrastructure that we are challenged with. Let me begin with the Water Operations Technical Support Program that this subcommittee has supported in the past. Clearly, with the changes that we have in weather patterns, atmospheric rivers constitute more and more a source of water for our regions in the West and certainly in California. The Operations Technical Support Program and the Forecast-Informed Reservoir Operation programs cannot be overstated. For an example, in California, we get most of our moisture between end of November and the end of March. The first 3 months of this year were below average, and we measure our rainfall in California, but elsewhere in 10-year averages, because sometimes you have an average, you have above average, you have below average. So the 10-year averages we've noticed in the last 2 decades have changed dramatically. And our reservoirs were built over a period of the last 60 to 80 years with flood management manuals that reflected what they thought were the 10-year averages back when these reservoirs were built. Across the West, 40 to 60% of our precipitation is now brought to us by these extreme atmospheric rivers events, meaning that an entire water may hinge on 2 major storms. We saw an example of that here in the last month. We were way below averages in the middle of February, and then we got 2 large atmospheric river events back in late February and early March. And now in Northern California, we're above average, and in the center of the state where I represent, we're slightly below average. Nonetheless, the Army Corps of Engineers needs to incorporate this latest data to try to determine how they can balance their flood control manual so that we can try to reserve as much space possible for these atmospheric rivers when they come. The seasonal forecasting observations now have become a critical reservoir tool for reservoir operations. These tools empower Western reservoirs to track and to respond to major precipitation events while retaining water that otherwise might be released. So this gives us more reliability factor. I requested this subcommittee in previous years, and I do once again this year, to provide $15 million for fiscal year 26 and $15 million for the FIRO program. These 2 areas are very helpful in better managing the reservoirs that we have in the West. Separately, the WinAct storage program related to this, recent winter storms in March helped to increase the levels of the snowpack in the northern Sierra Mountains. Although climate change continues to be a challenge, it oftentimes causes prolonged periods of droughts. The funds are necessary for increasing water storage across Western reclamation states to better manage our reservoirs. Such investments are necessary to capture water during the wet years so we can withstand the dry years. So I urge committee for the full funding of the $134 million water infrastructure investment for the nation. Congressman Kevin McCarthy and I worked on this a few years back and continue to want to maintain this good investment. Also, before the subcommittee, report language for the repair of the Bureau of Reclamation canals. As we know, in the West, water is the lifeblood of the West, and where we say water flows, food grows. We have 2 major aqueduct systems, the Franklin Canal and the Delta Mendota Canal and the California Aqueduct, that have all been impaired by age and land subsidence, seriously depleting their ability to move water. These defects seriously jeopardize the Bureau of Reclamation's ability to meet its obligations in the San Joaquin Valley, to feed our nation, where we have one of the largest agricultural valleys in the entire world. So we need to provide additional support to restore the capability of these canals. We urge the committee to advance the important projects by supporting report language of up to $30 million to repair the reclamation canals in fiscal year 26. Protecting the San Joaquin River Restoration Program that we passed in 2008 to resolve a settlement of a court agreement. The San Joaquin River Restoration Program aims to restore and maintain not only fish populations in the San Joaquin River, but to reduce the adverse water supply impacts to the farmers in the Friant Division. They wholeheartedly support this effort. The program is not as far along as we'd like, and it's very critical that we continue to provide support. The farmers are providing their support, as are the water districts, to ensure that we don't throw the management of the San Joaquin River into chaos and uncertainty. So I would urge the committee to avoid any efforts to eliminate this program, which was enacted, as I said, back in 2008. To complete the final two projects here on this, because our river systems in California are connected between the federal projects and the state water projects. We have two Adramus fish screens on the Sacramento River. I request that the committee provide $7.8 million in funding to finish these projects and to meet the higher quality standards and to protect our ability to move water between the San Joaquin Delta, Sacramento San Joaquin Delta, and the San Joaquin River Basin, moving water further south to the San Joaquin Valley and to Los Angeles. 95% of the water diverted from the Sacramento River will pass through these fish screens. That's most of the river. These projects help support a more resilient, reliable water supply for agricultural communities while enhancing the environment for local wildlife that are considered threatened. Finally, in closing, I want to thank the members of the subcommittee again for the chance to testify and continue to work for closer collaboration between the Army Corps of Engineers, the Bureau of Reclamation, and California State Water Project. This collaboration has been a history over the last 30, 40 years, and with all the challenges we're facing, it's absolutely essential. There was an unfortunate release back in late January, February on two Army Corps projects, Lake Success and Cahuilla, and we want to avoid those kinds of miscalculations of release of water when there's no good place for it to go to. And so I thank you for hearing my request. I'll be willing to answer any questions you might have. Keep up the good work of this subcommittee. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Costa, for your testimony, sir. At this time, I have no questions, sir, but I'd like to yield to the distinguished ranking member, Ms. Kaplan, to see if she has any questions.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Congressman Costa, thanks so much for testifying today. I believe you are a farmer yourself.
Yes, third generation, and very proud of the fact that my grandparents came to this country like a lot of immigrants with a deep desire to have a better life, and what they knew from where they came from in the Azores Islands was dairy, and came to California and got involved in the dairy business like a lot of other folks, first as milking cows and then later having our own dairy, and then that expanded to our ability to farm a lot of other types of crops that, the San Joaquin Valley in California, as you know, is the largest producer of agricultural production. 20% of all the milk in the country comes from California, 80% of the citrus production, 75% of the world's supply of almonds, walnuts, and pistachios come from California. Very diverse. And $59.2 billion last year at the farm gate. So if I didn't have this job, I do have some redeemable skills. I could get a job working in any dairy.
Well, I'm going to put you on the hot spot here. About 3/4 of a century ago, our favorite uncle and aunt moved from our hometown just south of San Francisco. They went out there to work with Dole and Libby and some of the big processors of fruits and vegetables. And that was terrible for me as a kid to lose them in our own neighborhood. But anyway, how has agriculture changed in the last century? in your region. I know what happened in the area they lived in. All the apricot trees were cut down for people. Lots of big superhighways came through, and it became much more expensive to live in California. Their neighbors, actually, 3 families lived there, and they would, each 8 hours of the day, a different family would go to work, and the next one would come home from work, and housing became very expensive. What's happened to agriculture in your part of America in this period of time?
Well, as a third-generation farmer, I thank you for asking the question. Change is constant. Change is constant, not only in California, but around the country. And I don't farm the way my father and my uncle did, and they did not farm the way their father did. And those that are able to stay involved in agriculture have to address changes to maintain generations in farming. In some cases, those changes are very difficult. For example, we have been overdrafting our groundwater supply in California, but other parts of the country have had that problem as well, because we get our water from 3 sources. We get it from the reservoirs that we have built in our mountains where the snow is, and it melts and it fills up our reservoirs. We get it from groundwater, and we get it from reusing water. We use all the water tools in our water toolbox. However, for decades, we have been over-relying on our groundwater. And I liken that to when I first went to Fresno State as a younger guy, and I had my first checking account. And my father told me, "Kid, you can only write those checks as long as you're making deposits." Well, that's our groundwater. And so we have to figure out strategies to ensure that we don't overdraft it. And we've been doing that in California since we passed a challenging law in 2014 by the state legislature that set up milestones in 2020, 2030, and 2040 to get our groundwater in balance. And we're meeting those goals, but it's hard. It's
How far down do you have to drill now compared to before?
depends what region you're in. My area, we have a better supply for a combination of reasons. It's about 150 feet. But out on the west side, they're drilling down as far as 1,500 feet, 2,000 feet at over $1.5 million per well. And what happens is then clay layers below on the surface, when you remove that water out of there, collapse, and then it limits your ability to restore that groundwater in the future when you have good water years. But we're learning to use, when we have these atmospheric rivers in the wintertime, to flood our fields where we have permanent crops, whether they be trees or vineyards. And we are having good success. We think in the last 18 months, we've recharged between about 1.6 million acre feet of water, which is a lot of water. We've seen certain places where the water table has risen anywhere from 8 to 10 to 15 feet in the last 2 years. So it's a long-term effort, but we are focused on it. And there's other things. The dairy industry, Costa Brothers sold out in a number of years ago, over 30 years ago, and there were 16,000 dairies in California. Average size was milking 250 cows, which is what about we were milking, and had a herd size of about 500 head. Today, there's just around 1,000 dairies left in California out of 14,000, but they're much larger. We're milking 2,000 to 3,000 cows average in a dairy. 5,000 cow dairies are not unusual. And so the change is hard, is you've had to get bigger in terms of the scales of economy to stay in the dairy business. We're still producing about 20% of all the milk products in America with those 1,000 plus dairies, but they're much larger in size, and they take a lot more resources. They're multi-million-dollar operations these days. And those are among the changes, and our cropping patterns have changed. We used to have about 1.4 million acres of cotton up into the early 1990s. Now, last year, I think we had 150,000 acres of cotton, but it had been replaced with walnuts, pistachios, and almonds, permanent crops. So these are among the changes. Our processing, our value added has changed. Our mechanization's changed. Most of the agriculture in California, like in other parts of the country, has become highly mechanized because of labor issues, in part, but also we're more efficient. And so these are among the changes. It's agriculture is more capital intensive, and I will say this very clearly, and I've never been a big fan of tariffs. 44% of California's agriculture is exported. And these issues of tariffs are, very, very challenging because if they last for any period of time, foreign markets that we've been able to benefit from, whether they be in Asia or Europe or elsewhere, they seek other sources of supply. We saw that happen in the last tariff round when a lot of our export to China on almonds became replaced with China seeking those almonds from Australia. So we can't believe that or rest that we get past this over 4 months, 6 months, a year, that necessarily we regain these markets. I had yesterday a citrus grower tell me that they ship a lot of their citrus crop to China, that they had 2 loads that were canceled here this week of what had been a usual ability to export their navels and their Valencias. So, when you have as large of agriculture economy as we have in California, these changes are real, and they economically impact entire communities. That means, people that have businesses, farm workers, some of the hardest workers you've ever seen in your life, all the people that are on the food chain that have value added on that supply, everybody, the ripple effect of the economy is real.
Thank you very much. I only have one final question, Mr. Chairman, and that is, with the recharging of your water supply because of the atmospheric river, how many crop cycles will that satisfy? 5 years, 3, 10?
Well, again, it's based on 10-year averages. We're hoping that we can take advantage of these atmospheric rivers as they continue to seem to be more of the norm, and plan accordingly so that we can maintain that water behind our reservoirs when they do come, and can anticipate in terms of how we manage these reservoirs. And that's why the funding here for the water operations technical support is so important as we manage our water supply more efficiently and effectively.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
Thank you, Ranking Member Capter. At this time, I'd like to recognize my friend, the gentleman from Idaho, Mr. Simpson.
Hi, Jim.
Hi.
Thanks for coming today.
A number of our dairies have gone to Idaho.
I was going to say, a lot of those dairies that left California have come to Idaho and made us the 3rd largest dairy state. And we're going to overtake Wisconsin before very long. We'll never overtake California. You got too much of the market and growing dairies in California. But I just was at a plant, Chopani, the largest yogurt plant in the world is in my district, and they just did a groundbreaking to expand that. They're going to go from using 4 million pounds of dairy, of milk, to 12.7. That means the dairy cows in the area are going to have to go from about 60,000 that produced the 4 million to about 171,000.
You've got Betancourt and a lot of folks from California, and they've got some good-sized dairies there as well.
Yeah, they're good friends.
Yeah, we've been impacted greatly by that high-path avian flu with our dairy and poultry industry. Has it come up there significantly in Idaho?
Yeah. Do you, just out of curiosity, do you in California manage your groundwater and surface water conjunctively?
Yes.
Okay. I had 2 goals. I had a number of goals, but 2 of them that I failed on when I was either chairman of this committee or ranking member under Marcy. One of them, and we talked about both of them today, one of them was to find a permanent geological repository for our spent nuclear fuel. That's Chuck's job now. And the other one that I could never solve is California water issues. It was probably one of the biggest challenges we had, because we had Republicans wanting one thing, Democrats wanting another thing, and finally I said, you guys need to get together. How together are Republicans and Democrats on California water now?
I would describe we're making progress. I used to chair the State Senate Ag and Water Committee in California when I was in the legislature. And having both agriculture and water made it a very important committee under its jurisdiction. And the things that I always tell people with California water is that it's the 3 C's. It's complex, it's complicated, and it's controversial.
Yep.
It's complex because we have the inner operations between very large federal water projects and a very large state water projects, and we've got local water projects. And they all were built at different times, financed differently, they have different rules of operation, but yet we share, a general supply of water, and we have to work together. And that's gotten better. The complexity of trying to work together in Sacramento and here in Washington is always part of the challenge, getting Democrats and Republicans to work together. But I think in recent years, one of the things that we've learned, and it gets back to the controversy, is that getting engaged in endless litigation doesn't bring one more drop of water.
Yep.
And so what we've tried to do in recent years in a bipartisan fashion is trying to look at interim and long-term plans to create the one thing that water users in California and in the West all seek, which is greater water reliability.
Yep.
Water reliability based on 10-year averages, realizing that some years are good, some years are not, and trying to determine what our average. I mean, California's been blessed. We've got the Sierra Nevada. We've got that as a major source of supply. And we have access to the Colorado River. But, the Colorado River is beset with the upper basin and lower basin states as well that were in endless litigation up until the 1960s, and they had the law of the river, and they finally resolved it. But they resolved it based upon evidence that is no longer real, and that is that the river on 10-year averages would yield 17 million acre-feet of water. Lake Mead outside of Las Vegas has not been filled since 2000, and it was almost a dead pool 2 years ago before you had these large atmospheric rivers that ended up providing more supply. And what we've come to the realization between the upper basin states and the lower basin states, and some people have rights to the river water that have never been able to exercise it, like Utah, because they're not connected to the river. And there's some Native American that have rights to the river that they've never been able to access. But what we've come to the realization in the last 2 decades with better understanding of water supply and measurements is that the yield of the river of the Colorado is about 10 to 12 million acre-feet. So this great agreement in the 1960s was reached by everybody allocating 17 million acre-feet on 10-year averages. Well, if your allocation is really more like 10 to 11 million acre-feet on 10-year, then guess what? They're starting to realize, well, how are we going to reallocate that smaller supply of water? And so the 3 C's are applicable. It's complicated, it's complex, and it is always controversial. But I think because we've been basically able to develop a plan, and it was interesting. I thought within the first couple weeks of the Trump administration, Governor Newsom specifically flew to Washington and had an hour meeting with the president. And over, I'm told, 3/4 of the meeting was on water and what the state's trying to do to work together with the federal government. The president signed an executive order that by April 20th, which is coming up, that the Secretary of Interior and the Secretary of Commerce would report to the president on water supply. And so we want to work with the administration, and we obviously know that it's in California and western states' long-term interest to try to find solutions to a reliable water supply, and that's what this is all about.
It's always easy to allocate water the more you've got of it. And when you're assuming that they looked at that and it was the 5 years before that had really wet years, and they were told at the time when they made this agreement, and they said that there was 17.5 million acre feet of water that went down to Colorado every year. They were told, you're only looking at the wet years. You're not looking at the dry years.
Right.
But it's always easier to allocate it, and you're right. That's the problem. I don't think we'll ever see Lake Mead and Lake Powell filled again.
Yeah.
It's
I
just,
flew over it yesterday, and you can see where the high mark was and where the lower is, and I agree with you.
yeah. Anyway, thank you. I appreciate it. And now that I'm no longer chairman or ranking member of this committee, I pass this on to someone who has the ability and the intelligence to solve this nuclear waste issue and the California water issue. And you and Laura can do a great job on this, I'm sure.
Let's work on all of it together.
Yes, gleefully, Mr. Chairman, and I thank you for your questions. And Mr. Costa, I thank you for your presentation, and we're solicitous of your thoughts, and I really appreciate the update on California water and agriculture. Thank you, sir.
Well, appreciate all of your good work, and when we work together, we get things done. Thank you.
Yes, sir. With that, the hearing's adjourned.
The other thing is